Crowdsourcing Love is brought to you by First Rounds on Me. First Rounds on Me is a dating app that I love that encourages you to actually go out on dates so you can create a real, genuine connection in person rather than trying to through your phone screen. First Rounds on Me is great because it cuts out all the small talk and helps plan your first date. You can only have one date per day, and you can only chat with your date 12 hours before your date starts. No more pen pals, go out and get to know someone in person. Lately, I've been meeting a ton of people new to New York City, and they keep asking me which dating app they should download. And I tell everybody to download First Rounds on Me because it's just so efficient. Everyone's busy in New York City, it's about to be summer, and no one has time to just sit on their phones and message back and forth a million times. So, download First Rounds on Me by going to the App Store or by clicking the link in the description below. Hello and welcome to Crowdsourcing Love. I'm your host, Marin from Life of Marin NYC. I am really single right now. The roster is completely at zero, which is kind of sad or ironic or funny after having the most stacked roster of my life the past 3 months. But there is something kind of magical about a clean slate, a fresh start, and just knowing that the people who are not for me have left, and that makes room for whatever is for me to come through. This week on the pod, I have Anna Kai. Anna is the content creator behind Maybe Both. She went viral last September after posting a fire dating and relationship advice post on her TikTok. She now has almost 2 million followers between Instagram and TikTok, which is crazy. She's such a star. She's an icon. And we really go there in this episode. I ask her all my burning questions when it comes to dating, relationships, and love. You know, she's been on both sides of the track. She dated in New York City for 10 years. She went on, I think she counted at one point and she came up with 208 dates total. And she's definitely somebody who kept it moving, and she just, she finally found her husband. But she talks about the process and she keeps it very candid and real. So I hope you enjoy this episode. If you have a minute, please rate, review, and subscribe. I appreciate it so much. Enjoy.
Before we started rolling, I just found out that Marin was 31. I thought she was 21. Guys, I don't know if you've seen a photo of her. This is audio, but that's wild.
I know.
That's great. Those are good genetics. Those will serve you well in
My
10
mom
years.
looks young. You look young. You look flawless. I can't get over it. I sound creepy now, though, so I'll stop. But so I have been following you forever. Like, I know that you became famous in September. That's when you started to go viral. But do you mind giving us your backstory of, how Maybe Both started and kind of the trajectory that you're on now?
Well, I like to say I failed at everything up until September 1st of 2022. And I started Maybe Both in September of 2020.
Okay.
The height of the pandemic.
Yep.
I was going through a quarter life crisis because I had lived in New York City for 11 years, moved out to Connecticut with my now husband, then boyfriend turned into fiance.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved out to Connecticut for his job. And I left my job in the city and had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I'm 30 years old. I turned 30 in October of 2020. That's the least sexy time. You can't do anything. You can't go out.
Yeah.
People were still very cautious. I was still very cautious. And I always knew I wanted to do something and had tried a lot of things throughout my 20s,
Yep.
which,
Which
you
is
know,
normal, though. Let's normalize that.
let's normalize that, but
Mhm.
also, I think a lot of people in my life, my girlfriends figured it out a lot earlier, and
Mhm.
I was just sort of on this very strange path to, I didn't know I was gonna be here, and so,
Yeah.
obviously, if I would have had a lot less anxiety in my 20s, but, I started my blog in September of 2020 because I was just like, "I have to do something," and I was privileged enough we were privileged enough that we did not need me to, make money in order to support our lifestyle at that time, and so, I could pursue, a passion project, and I just thought, "I'm never getting any younger than this. I might as well just do what I wanna do,"
Mhm.
and I was like, "I've always wanted to be some sort of a creator, have control, work for myself." So I started my blog, and it was a home decor blog when it started, and it was like a WordPress blog
I'm
and
obsessed.
Instagram.
So you're
And
good at home decor too, apparently.
you know what I'm like a jack of all trades,
Okay.
master of none. Like, I was not like the best home decor blogger. And honestly, it really only lasted for like a solid 2 months because I was like, I can't redecorate my house
No.
every day.
Yeah.
So much respect to the home decor bloggers out there. I have no idea how they do it. I was like, "Okay, this is not sustainable for me." I was, like, at Home Goods every single day, and I was like, "It's a lot of money on home decor." And
Yeah,
I
your
just,
husband's
like
like, "Excuse me."
I know, he was like, "What's going on?" He would come home, and I would have, like, the fireplace staged like a freaking it was, like, Christmas, and it looked
So
like,
funny.
"This is insane," you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, so this is not it." So I was like, "You know what?" I've always liked fashion, so I was like, "Let me try that." And so I started doing the hashtag outfit of the day, photos, took a lot of photos of myself in very public places.
Mhm. Did the whole Instagram influencer
Yeah,
photo,
very
yeah.
unsuccessfully, very
Okay.
unsuccessfully.
But it wasn't your calling.
No, it wasn't, and
Mhm.
I was like the millennial that refused to get on TikTok. TikTok was coming 2020,
Mhm.
2021, TikTok was huge, and I was like, "Nope, not gonna get a TikTok. I'm already failing at Instagram. Why would I fail at 2 platforms?"
Valid,
And
yep.
we bought like a fixer-upper house last year, and I took some time away just to do that house. And when that was all said and done, I was like, what am I going to do with my life now?
Mhm.
And I was like, I guess I could go back to blogging and see how that goes. And Instagram deactivated my account. They like suspended it because the algorithm picked up on something totally weird and
Yeah.
not controversial at all. And so I didn't have it for 3 months. And that's when I created a TikTok. And at the time, I had 3,000 Instagram followers, 87 TikTok followers, and I was like, it was just not working. Like, nothing
Mhm.
I was doing was working. And then I booked a call with a TikTok strategist who I actually love. Like, I talk to her semi regularly now. She's in Australia, and she was like, "Look, I think you should talk to camera instead of doing these fashion reels,
Mhm.
because you might have the personality to talk to camera." And I never heard anybody say that, and I didn't know I could do it. I love to talk to people, but you don't think
Yeah.
anybody's gonna care,
Totally.
you
That's our
know?
generation too, where you're like, "This
Yeah.
is cringy, this is weird."
Yeah, I'm like, we're such Gen Z is so much more unapologetic, and I love
Mhm.
that, but, like, millennials, we're always sort of just, like, apologizing as we walk into a room.
Before we even do
Oh,
anything.
yeah, and I'm just like,
Mhm.
"Nobody's, like, gonna listen to what I have to say," and she's like, "You should, like, upload stories about just your life." I'm like, what do I have to say?" And then I was like, "I've dated a ton," and so
Mhm.
uploaded that first story or video on September 1st, and, like, here we are now.
I love it. So you have been doing this or you've been viral for under a year.
Yeah, it's been, I think, 8 months,
Okay, and
and
how
it's,
has your life changed? Like, what's the biggest difference?
everything,
Really?
everything. It is an actual career. From a financial perspective, I've made more money than I ever made at my real estate job.
Mhm.
It's crazy. Like, I have an attorney, I have a manager. Like, what?
You
Like,
have an
what
LLC?
I have an LLC. What the
Mhm.
hell?
Yeah,
Like, it's just wild. I used to show that, like, sometimes we really just as people need to dream bigger. I
totally.
never would have ever expected to be here. And I'm so grateful for it because I
Yeah.
just realized, like, I think that's the nature of like going viral at 32 versus 22. I failed so much to realize how lucky I am to be here. And it's like, I try not to take that for granted, you
Yeah,
know?
well, and I experienced something similar. I only
Your
have 4
28
my
days.
28
Oh
dates
my
in 28
gosh.
days, but it is weird going viral, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, I was somebody to my family and my friends, of course, but to the bigger world, I went from being nobody to all of a sudden all of these news outlets reaching out to me and just, like, interested in my personal life and
Right.
featured in Bloomberg, and it's just crazy how, like, a switch can flip and all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're, like, elevated to this whole other life that you didn't even know could be possible.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
it's just because you put yourself out there and you
Yep,
were living your truth, which
totally.
I thought I dated pretty aggressively 28 days and 28 days that's a whole other level of respect right there.
Thank you. I feel like I ran a marathon and, like, now for the
Yes.
rest of my life, I'm gonna, like, brag about it. But
Which, by the way, I did run a
did
marathon,
you?
the New York City Marathon in 2017, and I
Wow.
do talk about it because I'm not at all athletic, and
It's a
it's like
feat, though. Like, it's not easy to run a marathon. That's
no,
incredible.
no, and it's not easy to go on 28 dates in 28 days, so that
I
is
know.
that needs to be a rom-com. I'm calling it now.
I hope it
Netflix,
becomes let's
hello,
manifest it.
hello.
Hello, Netflix, excuse
Yeah.
us. New York City for, like, 10 years. Or how many years
Yeah.
did you date in the
Wow, it
city?
was, because I came here when I was 18, 10
Mhm.
years, and,
Okay.
for people who didn't go to NYU, where'd you go to school?
Minnesota, so
Oh, it was
yeah,
a very, like, traditional college environment.
totally.
NYU is not at all. You barely date anybody, like, in college. You're very much just going to school in New
Mhm.
York City,
Yep.
and so I met my husband when I was close to 28, and so, yeah, I guess you're right. I was like,
10
"Was it
years.
actually 10 years?" Wow,
Yeah.
it was, yeah.
So, did you watch Sex and the City at all?
Of course,
Okay,
of
so
course.
who would you most closely relate to? Are you a Carrie, a Charlotte, a Samantha? Who's the other girl?
Miranda,
Miranda. Which one do
Miranda.
you most closely identify with?
I sort of feel like I identify with bits and pieces of all of them, to be honest.
Mhm.
There's not one single one.
Okay.
I think when I was younger, I very much felt like a Charlotte in the
Okay.
naivete of just kind
Mhm.
of thinking like, "Oh, I'm not interested in this guy, but he says he just wants to be friends, so I'll be friends with him." Like what 33-year-old man wants to be friends with a 23-year-old girl in New
No,
York City
they don't.
that they met on a dating app,
I don't think
right?
any man really wants to be friends with women.
And I think there's like an argument that's a very
That
like
sounds sexist.
no, no,
I
no, no,
may
no.
retract that,
No,
but
no, no,
yeah.
no. It's like it's the age-old question
Mhm.
of can men and women, heterosexual men and women really be friends? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question because I certainly know people that have very close male friendships that, it's not like a woman and a gay man.
Mhm.
I myself really only have one male friend, like from high school that I've known since I was 16.
Yep.
Everyone else is a woman because that's who I relate to, you
Totally.
know?
That makes sense. So, from those 10 years of dating in New York City, you talk
Mhm.
about being love bombed. That's a topic that comes up a lot on my page because I was severely love bombed by a 43-year-old man. And I felt so stupid because I'm 31 and I was like, I should be past this.
Yeah.
And so in your TikToks and your Instagram reels, you talk about being love bombed. Can you talk a little bit more about it here? Like, what are the red flags, the warning signs, and like how do you deal with it? Or how did you deal with it? Because obviously you're healthy and like married now.
And my love bombing experience, and again, like
Was it
5
multiple experiences or was it
there was
one?
one very pivotal one that
Okay.
kind of changed just my life,
Mhm.
and it was I wouldn't say he changed my life, I would say it was the catalyst to the life I have now, and
Okay.
5 years ago, the term love bombing didn't really exist, so
Mhm.
I didn't really know what was it 5 no, it was probably 8 years ago at this point. I was like, "No, I met my husband 5 years ago, that's not right." I met a guy and he was all in very quickly, like right after the first date. And I would say that's the biggest red flag is any man that needs to talk to you, text you all the time
Mhm.
right from the get-go before they even know you is a red flag because
Yep.
they're not actually into you. They're into the idea of you. They're into a 2-hour, 3-hour version of you and now they're building you up in their head and you have no idea if that version that they have in their head is actually of you. And I think what it
Wow.
is a lot of it is insecurity. So what I found out later on was this guy was almost a decade older than me. I think he was like 9 years older than me and he had just gotten out of a relationship, a very long-term relationship, had never been on the apps. I was likely, if not the first, one of the first people he went out with from the app we met on. And
Okay.
I think he was probably in a place where he needed to feel like he could date somebody on the apps. And I was very into him. And I
Mhm.
think um feeling wanted is a very intoxicating feeling, and I
Mhm.
think men feel that too,
Yep.
and I think that's what fed into it for a while. But then
Okay.
when push came to shove and I asked him, 2 months into our relationship, like, "What are we?" He was like, "I can't commit to you. It's too soon for me. I just got out of a 3-year relationship." I'm like, "Then what have we been doing for the last 2 months?" We've been going on these dates every weekend.
Mhm.
You've been texting me from morning until night. If we're not dating exclusively, then what are we dating? And he said, "I'm willing to date you, but it's been so long, honestly. I can't remember if you said non-exclusively, right? So I want to date other people, or
Yeah.
exclusively but without the labels of boyfriend girlfriend, which is also just complete BS.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in my life, honestly, that I was presented with the option of staying with somebody that I knew wasn't totally into me. And I said no, because I just remembered at the moment, I was like, this doesn't feel the same and this sucks. And I left and I sunk into a horrible depression. That's not even hyperbole. Like, I just got very depressed and
Mhm.
it was really sad. And I don't blame him for that because I have struggled with mental health before, so that was just a trigger, right? It's not like he was responsible
He
for that.
didn't cause it,
He
but
didn't cause it. It
he triggered it,
was
which
a
is
trigger, but,
valid.
like,
Yeah.
and it's like I take responsibility for my own mental health. Like, another person would not have fallen into a deep depression and questioned their life. I did. It's
Mhm.
fine. That's the journey I had to go
I
through,
love it. I
you
mean, I
know?
don't love that you had just
No,
depression, but I love the
I
self-awareness is what I'm trying to
love how
say.
sad you were.
Yeah, I'm like, that sounded off.
But, it ended up driving me to do really well at my real estate career. I was like,
Mhm.
I hate my personal life right now. I feel so sad. I'm just going to throw myself into my job. Had my best earning year up until, that point. And I just really, in the words of Beyonce, the best revenge is your paper, right? Like,
Totally. Yep.
get paid,
Mhm.
right? If you can't get the guy, get paid. As a woman,
Totally.
I think men have such a, because they've been taught since they were little boys, like,
Mhm.
get the career, then get the girl. And girls are just taught, get the guy.
Get the guy.
And it's like, no, get both. Because
Mhm.
honestly, nothing will make you feel better at the end of the day, even if a guy rejects you, than knowing that, like, you can just hold your own.
You're
You can
good.
support the life that you want to live.
Mhm.
Um, and look, we see that. Like, Hollywood is full of examples of women in their 40s who are crushing their careers and they adopt kids on their own.
Mhm.
They have babies via surrogacy on their own. And it's like, obviously at the end of the day, like, I wanted a partner, but we have to get comfortable with the idea that, like, we're so much more than just who we end up with.
Yep. I completely agree, and even in my story, I thought I was going to end up with this guy who we call the comedian, and then it
I
didn't
love how
work
you
out.
have different, like, nicknames for all of
Mhm. Like
them.
date number 2, the
I
lawyer, the
know.
comedian, but I didn't end up with him because similarly, he made it seem like getting into a relationship with me was gonna be a concession. Like, the way he
Right.
phrased it was he wanted to be exclusive, but no labels, and I just
How
had
old
too
is this
much
guy?
self-respect for that. He was 28, or he is still alive, so
Okay.
he's 20.
I know, I always
I
say that
mean,
to,
rest
like,
in peace.
in my life?
Yeah, he's dead to
Literally.
me,
Yeah.
but, to the world, he's 28 still.
Yeah, which honestly, in New York, I know, like, if you're not in a big city, that sounds, like, ancient and you should be ready to have children, but I
Mhm.
feel like in New York, below the age of, like, 32, men are still
They don't
fetus.
know. They are fetuses, and he's also trying to make it as a comedian and
That's
actor,
tough.
and you
That's
wonder about intentions at that point, and
yeah.
but I don't wanna go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
So when it comes to the exclusive talk, I know that you kind of asked him, "What are we?" I've also noticed on your TikToks that you discuss, like, different, rules you have around dating. Do you know of the rules, like the book, the
I've heard
rules?
of it.
Okay.
I've heard of it, and I've heard bits and pieces of
Mhm.
it, and I vehemently disagree with
Oh,
some
you
parts of
do?
it.
Okay.
I can't remember. You know what I can't remember. I was listening to, and this is nothing against the author or whatever. It's
Mhm.
just like it's just not how I choose to look at my relationship, and it's a very old book,
It's
right?
older, yep.
It's okay, yeah, or it's older. It was like what, back in the in
1990s,
the
I
90s.
believe, yep.
And I think the crux of what I took from that was that it almost feels like the book is saying that you have to trick a guy into
Mhm.
being with you. Like,
Yeah.
I think one of the and you know what? If I'm wrong on this point, then just screw everything I'm saying. But I think one of the points that the author makes is that you can't like show too much of who you are to your husband prior to marrying him because then by the time he realizes you're crazy he'll be married to you, so like there's no way out.
Mhm.
And I just but look, it was written 30 years ago. The
Right.
rules were different back then. So it's
So
not like, what I never think that what I say is the end all be all. I think
same.
a lot of what I say works for some people and it really doesn't work for a lot of
Mhm.
others. Some of my close friends included. So I don't agree with the rules, but if it works for some people, that's
Mhm.
great. They're happy. To
Yep.
me, it feels exhausting because I just don't know how else to be other than myself and I have to pretend to be a different person in order to like trap a man. Like
Mhm.
that's just not the life I want.
The reason why I brought up the rules
Yeah.
was because I think you naturally may have done some of the rules when I was
Gosh,
listening
that's
to some
hilarious. I'm
different.
like, I disagree,
Yeah,
but
but no, I think that you act like, just because that's kind of who you are, where,
yeah.
like, um I was listening to you on a podcast, and you were talking about how you always, like, waited for your husband to text you first while he was courting you. Like, you
Yeah.
never really texted him first. So what were some of, like, maybe they weren't strategies, maybe
Yeah.
they were just what you genuinely were doing, but can you discuss some of the tactics?
Yeah.
I don't want it to sound manipulative because I
No,
know
no,
you
no,
were
no,
just
no,
being
no.
yourself, but, what were some habits by the time that you did find your husband
Yeah.
that over the 10 years of dating in New York City, you refined some of your dating skills
Yes.
that ultimately led you to being in a healthy relationship?
And maybe I do have some crossover with the rules book.
Mhm.
I don't know it deeply enough to, I just remember hearing a few points and I was like, that doesn't sound right. But
Right.
to that point,
Mhm.
I still think women and men, and I'm talking about heterosexual women and men, right? I've never been in a same sex relationship. I don't
Okay.
know anything about, so I speak from my point of view, and I think that's a very, very important thing to know because anything other than that, it's like I have no experience. Why would I talk about
Right. And it
that?
does differ.
It does. I
Mhm.
have no idea how non heterosexual relationships, polyamorous relationships work. The rules are different,
Totally.
but I think heterosexual men and women are just very different. And my belief was if a man is interested, he's interested, regardless of whether you encourage him or not.
Mhm.
So I actually talked to my husband about this. I was like, oh, when you were, because he dated a ton too. He was 34 when I met him, and he had
Mhm.
been single for 4.5 years. So I was like, would girls date you, or no, would girls text you after the first date? Maybe not to ask you out again, but to say, hey, I had a great time, blah, 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 just to like show that they were interested, right? He was like,
Mhm.
yeah, that happened a lot. And not that I have a, problem with other women doing that. I just never did that. I remember leaving that date with my husband, the first date, and I was like, that was a great date,
Mhm.
but you can never know, right? You can never know how someone else felt about
Not in New
you.
York City.
Not in New York, which is
Mhm.
what I realized. You can go on the most amazing date in the world and you'll never hear from them again.
Mhm.
And I just said, if he never texts me, that was it. I'm not going to encourage him because I still think that there is something to be said about traditional male female roles to an extent. And like, I
Mhm.
realize I'm picking and choosing here, but it's like at the end of the day, I feel like I can be a strong feminist and still want to be pursued, right?
Mhm.
Those two things don't necessarily have to be separate from one another. And I do think at the end of the day, this phrase is so overused, but I think it's true. If he wanted to, he would.
Mhm.
And you do not need to give him any encouragement. And I didn't. And he always texted to make plans and would initiate in the beginning. And then obviously you fall into a rhythm and then, you don't feel so weird about sending the first text. But that's like a couple months in when things are a little bit more like
Established.
established.
So, when did you start planning dates for your husband, if ever?
I don't.
Did you ever at any point? Because with me doing the 28 dates, a lot of the
Oh, yeah,
internet
yeah.
trolls were like, "Well, are you gonna plan a date?" And then I started to do something that wasn't natural for me because I'm very similar to you where
Yeah.
I like to be pursued in a traditional way. And then because I was online and I had all
Yeah.
these people in my ear, I started to plan dates for these men, and it really threw it off for me. It
Yeah.
felt off. I didn't
'Cause it's
like
not true to
it.
you.
It's not true to
If
me.
you wanted to, it would be so fun. But if
Mhm.
you don't want to, then don't do it. And the answer is no. I don't plan, but
I
it's so
love it.
funny. We've been married for 5 years. Now
Mhm.
it's just we have our spots we go to and we talk about where we want to go,
Mhm.
and he'll make the reservation or I'll call and make the reservation. In the beginning, no, it was him doing all of that. And it's really at the end of the day, what I think a traditional date is going out to dinner or drinks.
Mhm.
It's not like he was planning these elaborate, like we're going to the museum and then we're going to see a comedy show and then it's drinks and dinner. That's my favorite
Yep.
type of date because that is the date that you have nothing other than the food and the drinks but each other, and you can really figure out whether or not you two get along well and you have conversational chemistry and all the other types of chemistry, right?
Mhm.
I don't I never liked activity dates. I didn't wanna go rock climbing. I mean, I don't like activities in general.
Yeah.
I like
Which is like you have to be true to yourself because I feel like so many people, women specifically, try to morph themselves into something that they're not.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of doing it in
No,
the
I was
past,
too.
and now I'm kind of over that.
Yeah, 100%. And I was a social chameleon when I was younger. I
Mhm.
told my mom so many times that I thought I could just mold my life to whoever would take me.
Yeah, you could plug yourself in
Yeah,
whatever outlet.
right.
Mhm.
And thank God that the universe just basically, all those men that I would have married dumped me. So it's like,
Thank God. Thank you,
I
sir.
know, right? But it's insane to me that I would have married any number of these men in my early 20s and that would have been my life. And I mean, who knows? Maybe I'd be happy because I wouldn't know anything else, but I wouldn't have the life I have now. And
Mhm.
so, what was the original question? I'm on a total tangent
Just
now.
yeah, no, I love this. I was just asking if you were planning any of the dates, early days or
Okay.
ever. I know that you
Oh.
also don't pay for dates, which I love, but it's another hot topic that's out there. And I know that you have a pretty hot take about it. Do you mind just briefly covering that?
You summed it up pretty
Mhm.
well. I don't pay for dates. And I still don't pay for dates, even though my husband and I are married and all of our finances are pooled. At the
Yep.
end of the day, he's the one pulling out his card. And I think the argument is, oh, you're taking advantage or blah, blah, blah. And I don't think I've talked about this a lot in various forms on my channels, on different
You
podcasts,
have,
but
yeah.
I think what I haven't really talked about is that I do a ton of the work in our home. And I knew I am a traditional housewife, if we want to put those in air quotes, and I
Mhm.
enjoy doing traditional housewife stuff. So I clean, I cook, I handle all of our, bills. And
Mhm.
I don't see that but I also work, I have my job and I love all of it. I don't consider any of it to be a chore. I don't consider it to be demeaning.
Mhm.
And my husband's not good at that stuff. And I'm the one at the end of the day, we renovated our whole house. He moved in. He walked into the house and it was done. I handled all of
Mhm.
that. And I it's about the team and the partnership, and I knew where my strengths lie.
Mhm.
And he's for example, last year when we moved into our house, I installed smart thermostats everywhere and I could control it from my phone. And I went on a bachelorette party. This was last July.
Mhm.
And it was the first time my husband Dave was home alone for a whole weekend by himself with a dog. We have a golden retriever. It's July in Connecticut. And he calls me and I'm like at the Jersey Shore, 3 drinks deep in at dinner, and he's like, "The AC is not working. It's the middle of a heat wave." And I check my app and I'm like, "The house is 86 degrees. All 5 thermostats are at 86 degrees." I'm
Yeah.
freaking out because it's a Saturday. I can't get a hold of any contractors. And I call our HVAC guy, he doesn't pick up. I text him and I was like, "Oh my God, what am I gonna do?
Mhm.
I'm not even there. I don't even." And then I realized that he didn't turn the setting from heating to cooling.
Oh, no.
So he was turning the temperature down, but it was still at heating, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so he is amazing at his job. He's amazing at so many different things. He's so like analytical. He's great with numbers, all that. I'm awful at that,
Yep.
but I'm good at like practical life skills.
Yeah.
And that is what I bring to the I'm not saying, I'm not saying to women, hey, you essentially need to look at your husband as like a provider, a caretaker, and do everything for you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying know where your strengths lie.
Yep.
And if, it's not in that. And by the way, I have girlfriends who are the provider in the relationship. I have a friend who's married and she is the breadwinner and her
Mm-hmm.
husband is better at the house stuff. It's just all about finding a match. And I think, but the other thing too for me is generosity of spirit is such an important
Yes.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the men who have a problem with paying for dinner or drinks,
Mm-hmm.
that extends to other parts of their life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm not about, right? And, they can say, I mean, look, I've gotten trolled so much at this point. I've just heard it all from
Yeah.
guys who are like, oh, you say it's not about the money, but it is about the money. But yeah, it is about the money because at the end of the day, we all need money to live,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, there's still a pay disparity. Women are not paid as much. Sexism is alive and well.
Oh, yeah.
And so until the playing field is truly equal, which,
Mm-hmm.
I hope we see it in our lifetime, I don't know if we will, it shouldn't be that big of a deal for a guy to pay for a date.
Yep.
Let me put it this way, I never ran into any issues with that in New York. I never did.
I
And
didn't really either.
yeah, I
So when
don't,
people talk about it, though, it's so interesting. And
yeah.
you hit the nail on the head. It's a generosity of spirit. I was just at a lunch with and she was talking about this celebrity that she used to set her friends up with
Mhm.
who used to go Dutch. And so that just shows like the
And it's a
generosity of
celebrity
yes, like he
who, like,
was
presumably
has a
has a
lot of money.
yeah.
And so it's not always it's a spirit thing because
And some
I
of the
yeah.
wealthiest people are the stingiest people.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And so when I'm looking for my future partner, it's that generosity of spirit that I'm really looking for more than anything.
right,
I don't need somebody who's a multimillionaire. I need somebody who can pick a fun date spot, take me to dinner,
right.
treat me like a queen,
Yeah,
and that's it.
because I think the thing is it makes it more fun for you when you're
Mhm.
in a relationship to give to him. I love, on a Friday night, Dave gets home from work, he's exhausted, he just, goes on the couch and he watches TV and I'm making dinner and I clean and whatever. And I don't see that as like, oh my gosh, like look at what I'm doing for you. You just
Yep.
get to lie on the couch with the dog and I'm slaving away. I'm happy to do that,
Yeah, cuz you're also generous to him.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's not like he's taking advantage of me, all these like 50-50 relationships where
Mhm.
it's like, "Well, I did this, so now you should do this." I just think that's a very toxic mentality because you're not approaching life as a team.
Mhm.
You're
It's tit
approaching
for
life as
tat.
a zero-sum game,
Yep.
So
Yeah, totally. No, that's I love your take on it, by the way. Okay, so another question that I get a lot from my following is about the exclusivity talk. Um, so with your current husband, did you ask him like what are we? Or because the rules, going back to the rules, they say never to ask and just like let him
Oh, is that what they say? Okay.
yeah, they basically say, like, "Don't ask, let the guy be so obsessed with you because you're so hard to get that he eventually wants to lock you down." Um, how do you feel about that?
I mean, I don't play games.
You don't?
I don't play games, but I think there's by the time I met my husband, I didn't play games, but I knew my worth, and it wasn't
Mhm.
like I wasn't begging him to be with me. My rule was by that point, I'm not going to be physically intimate with you unless we are boyfriend, girlfriend, exclusively dating each other. You're
Mhm.
comfortable introducing me to the people in your life and vice versa. And people jump into bed very quickly in New York.
They
And I
do.
think you hold out, and it's not even like, oh, I held out because I was like wanted to make him. I didn't want to give that part of myself because I get attached after
Yes.
being
Women do.
intimate.
It's
Yeah,
it's oxytocin, like, it's a chemical
100%.
reaction, and yes, women can have friends with benefits, they can, but
Some
it
people are
doesn't work
better
for
at it,
everyone.
and it didn't work for me.
Mhm.
And I have girlfriends who can hook up casually and feel very little. I
Mhm.
was never that type of person, right? And so I'm honestly jealous of people that could have done that, that could do that because you end up getting hurt a lot less. But I knew that about myself. And, you start dating somebody 2 and 3 months in, if you're seeing them every week and like you refuse to hook up with them, the question is like, and he sort of was like, what's going on with you?
Yeah, how did you dodge it? Did you tell him, like, "I
Well,
have this rule,"
for a
or
while,
yeah.
I just, I would just pull back after,
Mhm.
it gets to a certain point you're making out and you're like, cool, we're just gonna, and
We're
then
good.
we're good. And I think we got to a point and he was just like, what is going on? Like, I think he
Mhm.
thought, like, he was like, are you like, more, I don't know if he asked me, he's like, are you religious? Like, are you like saving yourself for marriage? And I just
Yeah.
said, no, I don't hook up with people unless we are exclusively in a relationship, boyfriend,
Mhm.
girlfriend. And he was like, oh, I thought we were already that. And I was like, no, not until we have the talk. And he was like, cool. Yeah. Well, you're my girlfriend. It was so
It
easy.
was easy.
It
It
was
just
so
felt
easy.
natural, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Yeah, so I was trying to do Steve Harvey, who has a 90-day rule where he's like, you wait
Oh,
90 days before having sex with somebody because then you fully know, like, what their intentions are.
right.
Um, in his philosophy, like, by that time, you would also be boyfriend and girlfriend.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely difficult in New York where there is just such a fast, like, hookup culture where
Yeah.
people are like, "Yeah, we hooked up on the 1st or 2nd date."
Or it's like by date 5, if you haven't hooked
Yeah.
up with them, it's almost like, what are you not attracted to them?
Mhm. So how did you navigate that? So a lot of people do ask me, like, if because I have followers who are like, I used to subscribe fully to hookup culture where they would hop
Right.
into bed with somebody on the first date, and now they're like, "This isn't working for me, so I wanna try to wait longer."
Right.
And their biggest question mark was, how do you know, like, if you're gonna be attracted to that person sexually? How do you know if you're gonna have, like, sexual chemistry? How
Right.
did you kinda suss that out with we don't have to talk about your
Oh, yeah,
husband, but
yeah, yeah.
other
No.
people as well?
And I understand, this just was never, and I remember talking to Lindsay about this when we met
Mhm.
at Acme. Because she was like, I've definitely dated guys who I really got along well with them, but then it just like wasn't there in the bedroom. And I honestly have never had that situation where I
Mhm.
conversationally got along well with them. I was attracted to them, and like all of a sudden the bedroom was like totally different.
Yep.
And so I can't speak to that experience. I'm sure it exists. I'm sure it's real, but I personally think like for me, the physical aspect is like ancillary to the emotional aspect, and that's what makes the physical good. Like you could, and we've all like been there, you could be hooking up with the hottest guy ever and not really know him,
Mhm.
and it's just weird,
Yep.
because it's like hooking up with a Ken doll. It's like, okay, you're so hot, but like
Yeah.
there is nothing safe, intimate, actually, sexy about this. It's just sort of transactional almost at that point.
Yeah, and for me, it's like I also need that emotional connection to really enjoy sex with
Yeah.
somebody. I think it's like feeling safe, feeling like I know them. Yeah, you can maybe have a messy hot hookup here and there that's
Right.
random,
Yeah.
but it's really like few and far between for me at least. And so I'm still trying to figure it out because I'm like 90 days feels like an eternity, but in the grand scheme of things it's not.
It's really not.
So,
And I did it. And I did it not just with my husband, but I did it with a couple relationships prior to him.
mhm.
And I'm so glad I did, because at the end of the day, the men who were in it for a relationship, even if it didn't work out in the end, stuck around, and we
Mhm.
were boyfriend, girlfriend, and we both invested, and we invested the time to see if we could get married, right? And
Yeah,
you don't find that out unless you commit. And then the men who really were just in it for a casual hookup just left.
that's so true. It's a way to
So,
weed people out.
yeah, guys don't, it doesn't even take 90 days. There are
Mhm.
a lot of guys who will not stick around for 30 days if they just know. And I wouldn't, if people are like, how do you broach the subject? You don't have to be coy about it. I just said, I don't hook up with anybody who's not my boyfriend.
Mhm.
Literally, that's how you say it.
Yeah,
Exclusively,
easy.
we're together. And if the thing is, it's not, I remember saying, it's not that you need to make that decision now if you're not
Mhm.
ready for that. I'm fine continuing to date and seeing if we want to get to that point. But until we get to that point, I will not sleep with you.
I love it. So
Yeah.
empowered the way you said it. It's just like these are my standards.
Right.
Take them or leave them.
And I
Mhm.
had to learn that the hard way. I wish I knew that at
Mhm.
22, but I
Totally.
didn't.
Yeah. Kind of switching gears.
Yeah.
I had a listener who asked this to you. So they said you're super confident. How do you stay confident on days where you feel low or you're not feeling so good? Like, what are your secrets to confidence?
It's not a secret. It's the fact that I am, at the end of the day, I care about what other people think just as much as
Mhm.
anybody else does. I have my moments of insecurity. I am neurotic as hell. I have literally diagnosed like anxiety and OCD, and I am okay with all of that. And that's why I'm confident because it's all part of the same human. And so there are days I don't feel good. I mean, it's just been a very weird ride for me because all this happens so quickly. And so there are moments where I'm just like, how do I deal with this?
Mhm.
And seeing nasty comments and getting trolled. I think it's just more about understanding that being a confident person doesn't mean you have to feel confident and like a badass bitch all the time. It's admitting that you're human and that you're allowed to be human, and that's really freeing. And I
Mhm.
make mistakes. I've hurt people. I've been hurt. I've been the Chad. I've had
Mhm.
a Chad thrown upon. I've done it all. And I think I just lived life very head on in my 20s, which I wouldn't necessarily suggest I think about if I had daughters in the future,
Mhm.
I probably would want them to be a little bit more cautious with their 20s than I was. But I think in terms of confidence, my confidence comes from the fact that I am insecure in a lot of areas and
Mhm.
I accept that and I'm okay admitting that to everyone. And I hope other people feel I have the same insecurities as everyone. At the end of the day, we're all just wondering, like, where's my career going? And I feel very secure in my relationship. That is one area that I have figured
Mhm.
out. But for a long time, I didn't feel good about that.
Mhm.
And I still wonder, is this a career that I can make long term? It happens so quickly. Is it going to go
Yep.
away? Those are my concerns right now. And so I think when you finally admit to yourself that you have these fears and that makes you human, it just gives you a little bit more agency to dictate how you view life.
Mhm.
I don't know if that made any
No, it
sense
did.
at
It made
all.
so much sense, and I love that you brought up how you would talk to your daughters because that's how I like when I'm trying to talk if I'm having a bad day, I try to be like, "How would you talk to your best friend in this moment? How would you talk to your sister? How would you talk to your
Yeah.
future daughter?" And I would be kind to them and I would hype them up,
Yeah.
and so I'm gonna do the same to myself.
Yeah.
Okay, and then also when it comes to ghosting,
Yes.
I've been ghosted, everyone's been ghosted. It's
Right.
just a cultural phenomenon. One time a guy called me and I was like, "I wish he would have ghosted me instead," because it was such an awkward conversation. I was like, "Do we
He
really need to
called
do
you?
this?" He called me. I'm like, "You could
How
have
many dates had
texted
you gone
like
on?
4 or 5."
Okay.
It was
It
respectful.
was it I will say 4 or 5 is the cuspy point where it's
Mhm.
like, do we I
Talk
will
about
say, but it is
this.
so awkward. I know, it's like
So,
yeah.
okay, so I have a lot of people who follow me who ask, should I send them a closure text or do I just keep it moving and not say anything to them? What's your stance on that? Like,
After
if you
the
were to be ghosted.
Yeah, my
Mhm.
philosophy on this, after the first date, if nobody's feeling it, you don't owe anybody
Mutual
anything.
ghost.
Yeah, mutual
Yeah.
ghost. That's not even ghosting. That's just like, hey, we went on one date, we owe each other nothing.
Let's not talk about it because it will just
Um,
make it weird.
yeah, 2
Mhm.
dates, I probably still subscribe to the same thing.
Yep.
Somewhere 2 to 3 dates. If you go on 5 dates with somebody, you owe them an explanation. I probably wouldn't call anybody. If it were me, I would have just texted them like, "Hey, it's been great
Mhm.
getting to know you. I'm just not feeling it." Um, I think that's where I draw the line. And then I've heard of crazy stories, personal stories with girlfriends where they've been ghosted after 3 to 6 months of dating.
That's
That
insane.
is actually heinous.
Psychopath.
No, that is another level.
You don't
Yeah.
even want to be with that person because they have really bad mental issues, clearly.
It's insane. I have a friend of a friend,
Mhm.
who she was dating a guy for 6 months, like full on dating him, right? Like boyfriend, girlfriend,
Mhm.
and he just ghosted her one day. Just ghosted her. Horrifying. And she couldn't get a hold of him. She called him at work at his office line and he picked up because he didn't know it was
Mhm.
her. And she was like, "What the hell? I've been trying to get in touch with you for the last 3 weeks." And he was like, "I'll call you later. Don't ever call this line again." Never called her. What is wrong with that man?
A lot.
A
That's
lot.
actually really heinous.
I know. And I don't like to tell that story because I think that is so rare,
Mhm.
and you should never scare people, but I think about that and I'm like, "Wow," it's like, "You think you're messed up? No, that man is messed up."
Mhm. Well, and, in that case, I probably would send a closure text just for
I
myself.
know.
So it's all about, like, what is gonna help you move forward. I
Mhm.
used to send closure texts, and then I would have men respond by being like, "Wow, you're so mature, like, thank you so much."
Yes.
That always felt good and validating. Now I'm kind of at a point in my life where I'm always dating multiple people at the same time.
Right.
So I'm kind of like, rejection is protection. If you
Yes.
ghost me, okay,
Doesn't
bye.
matter.
It doesn't matter. But it also depends on how invested I am.
Yeah.
The guy who called me, I wasn't that invested in him. So I'm kind of
Right.
like, why are you calling
Yeah,
me?
so it's almost like, "This is annoying that I have to
Yes.
take 5 minutes to talk to you or
Yeah.
10
I'm like,
minutes,"
excuse me, sir.
which is, by the way, a sign that that was not your man. 'Cause
Totally. I
you, like,
know.
were annoyed that he called to end
Yeah,
it.
and I wish we
Where
could have mutual ghosted, but apparently he wanted to talk about it. Whatever. One thing I wanted to ask you about,
Yeah.
because during my 28 dates in February, I talked to like a lot of guys where we went on like, you know, 3 to 5 to 6
Yeah.
dates, but then it never turned into a relationship. So, how do you stop being the girl that guys want to go on 3 to 5 dates with but not commit to?
I think there's a common misconception that that was a very sort of, uh very rules like
Mhm.
video in terms of like play hard to get, blah, blah, blah. It's not about playing hard to get or playing games. It's about getting to a point in your life that you realize that you are hard to get because you will not settle for anything. And that's
Mhm.
something I learned the hard way because I think energy is something that people can pick up on. Desperation is something that people can pick up on.
Mhm.
And in my early 20s, I spent a lot of time just being extremely agreeable, like obsequious on dates, and really settling for whatever I could get.
Mhm.
And men pick up on that and they're like, well, if you're willing to take less and give me all of you, then why would I give you more?
Yep.
And so I finally got to a point where I just realized it wasn't about making the men that didn't see my value.
Mhm.
It was about eliminating those men as quickly as possible so that I could meet the one guy
Who
that
did?
saw who I was and what I had to offer. And that is, I end that video saying, "Don't ever let him forget you're the grand prize," because to one guy, you are the grand prize, and to my
Totally.
husband, he never for a second and has never for a second made me feel like I was not a priority, second best, anything. From the second we met, it was healthy, it wasn't love bomby, he had a life, he had a job, he wasn't texting me every hour, but he never let me feel like he never let me wonder. And I
I love
think that's
that.
what it is. It's not about playing games. It's about knowing yourself, which is so much harder because playing games is a lot easier
Mhm.
and fronting is a lot easier than really believing in your core that you deserve better and you will not settle for less.
Yeah, that's a mic drop right there. Okay, so we only have like a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask you 2 or 3 listener questions, if that's
100%.
okay.
Yeah.
The first one was, did you ever date a guy named Chad?
No, I never dated a man named Chad. I have a Chad in my life right now, like an actual Chad. He's like
Mhm.
an uncle to
Uncle Chad.
yeah, he's like an uncle figure to my husband and I. He's my husband's old hockey coach from when he was in high school, and he
Oh,
came to our wedding,
funny.
and I love him, and I just thankfully he's a little bit God, if he listens to this, he's a little bit out of the age range of social media, so
Mhm.
he's probably not listening to this.
Yep.
So, but yeah, no, never dated a guy named Chad.
Okay. I love it. Why'd you not choose like Brad or Vlad?
Honestly, it
Chad.
wasn't even a thought. I did not go into that first video or second video thinking I was like, that's a name that sounds like
Mhm.
generic enough that it could be. I never wanted to out anybody that I dated, and I was like, I'll
Mhm.
just use this name.
Do
And it's also I'm not the first person to come up with it. The
No, it's a
don't
trope. It's a
yeah,
trope.
the don't be a Chad, that's a
Mhm.
trope. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, people will get that, kind of the connotation of what
You were
that
dealing with.
yeah, exactly.
So, have any of the past Chads reached out to you?
They have not.
Okay.
And I had a type, and I was sort of allergic to men with social media. So even from high
Hmm.
school, like I know my high school ex boyfriend, one of them, never got an Instagram, which is so weird. It's not like he was so much older or anything like that. He just so for some reason my type of guy is a guy that doesn't have social media. And I think if you're not on social media, you probably don't know that I'm talking about you.
You're in the New York Times, you're on Kelly Clarkson.
Yeah, but I don't think the men I dated are reading, the style section of the New York Times or watching daytime television, for lack of a better term.
True. No, I get that. I feel
And
that.
I think
Mhm.
I'm a very, niche community.
Yep.
And I just, and maybe they've seen it and they just haven't reached out, but that's not the point. I don't want to, a lot of them are married, living their lives, and I wish
You
the
all
best
have
for
moved
them.
on,
We've
and you're
moved on.
using it as stories to teach people
Right.
lessons. It's not a attack on them or anything like
No,
that.
I mean, it probably sounds like an attack.
No,
but
it
at the
doesn't. I think it's just a way to
Yeah.
communicate lessons that you've learned in your dating
Yeah,
journey.
it's not about outing them. I never want
No.
anybody to find out who I'm talking about, We've all because
Totally.
I've fucked up so much in my life. I was the Chad in so many and I
Mhm.
am the Chad in so many stories,
Yeah, we're a villain in everyone's story, like you say.
Exactly.
Um, this person said, "How to know if it's platonic versus a slow burn that will grow."
I always subscribe to the theory that if you have to ask yourself the question, it's not a good sign.
Really?
I think women's intuitions are a lot stronger and a lot more accurate than we give ourselves credit for. And it's only when our intuition is in an inconvenient truth that
Mhm.
we start to question and look outside of ourselves for the answers.
Yep.
So, if you have to ask the question, it's probably platonic because if it was a slow burn, you would feel it and you wouldn't need to ask a person like me who's completely uninvolved in the situation, for my opinion.
That might be my most favorite hot take ever. That's so good. Because I even ask myself that where I have all this outside noise being like, "Well, he's cute, he has a good job, he's so
Yeah.
nice to you." And then my gut is saying, "Yeah, but this isn't my guy."
Yeah.
And I
You
wanna
should listen to
feel
that.
some fireworks, and it doesn't have to be the crazy fireworks where it's my anxious attachment is triggered and my
Right.
past trauma is triggered, but I wanna feel that, like, comfortability and that intrigue that keeps
Romance,
bringing me
yeah.
that romance that keeps bringing me back for more and more and more.
Mhm.
Huh.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, let's end on that, and then well, actually, technically, we're not ending on that because I like to end my podcast by asking, what is your overarching mantra or biggest piece of advice when it comes to dating? Like, what would you want everyone to hear today?
Well, I think you're a perfect example of it. Just keep freaking going. I say
Mhm.
that all the time. Just keep freaking going, even though it seems like you're never going to meet him, because at the end of the day, he's just as frustrated looking for you and he hasn't found you yet. So, what are you going to do? Give up on your future husband?
I love it. That's such a mic drop. Okay, plug yourself, please, and then yeah.
My name is Anna Kai. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. And you can find me at Maybe Both on Instagram, at Maybe Both Styles on TikTok because at Maybe Both was taken, and maybe both.com for my advice blog.
No Twitter?
I do have a Twitter, but I'm very inactive on it. I'm Maybe Both on Twitter, but I'm very uninteresting on Twitter. I don't think I've posted in like 2 months.
I don't like to live on Twitter. It's scary there, but thank you again for coming, Anna. It's been
Thanks for having
amazing.
me.
Yay.
Hey.
That was
Oh my
so
God.
fun.
So fun.
Thanks again to our sponsor, First Rounds on Me. If you're tired of endless small talk with an overwhelming number of pen pals, go download First Rounds on Me now and get yourself a real date.